Okay, I hope everyone can hear me, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Professor Ponnurangam Kumaraguru, PK as he is known. He's a professor of computer science at IIIT Delhi, and he's been he had his PhD from Carnegie Mellon University, and also created a award-winning startup, Wombat Security Technologies, while he was, which was based on his PhD thesis. PK is very active in the ACM circles in India. He's a distinguished and eminent speaker. He has given TEDx talks. He leads the Computer Security and Education Research Center at IIIT Delhi, and manages the Precog research group at IIIT Delhi. He's also the Dean of Student Affairs at IIIT Delhi, and maintains an excellent rapport with students and everybody. So without further ado, I give the floor to PK to start his talk.
Thank you, Professor Kamal. Thanks, Professor Kamal, for actually inviting me for this talk, and session chair also for coordinating. And thanks to Cords and Command for inviting me to this talk. Is there any way by which we can actually see people on the call, so that for whoever is possible to set your video okay? If you can leave your video on, that would be nice, because it looks very weird actually giving a talk with some just some icons. Or probably the setting is that it is only the session chairs and session panelist whose name even shows up, I think. I'll let the volunteers decide. Whatever is the protocol, please keep it. It's just for, as a speaker, it'll be very nice to see the audience in some form or the other when we're giving the talk. Otherwise, it's going to be really weird giving a 1.5 hour talks looking at just the monitor. So Professor Kamal or Karthik, can anything be done, or this is the things?
I'm not sure. I think there's some standard procedure that the volunteers know. I leave it to them to see how much of it is feasible. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll leave it to them. Okay.
Yeah.
So the talk I'm assuming the participants can at least do the chat, right? I should be able to see.
Yeah, they can.
I have the chat window.
Yeah, the participants can give a Q&A, which is also visible to you. And when I see questions, I can also read up those questions for you. Yeah.
Can I get the participants to just do a +1 in the chat? Okay, I'm seeing some +1s coming. Nice, at least Anmol, Arjun, Hariharan, Garima, very nice to see at least some people are awake right now. Hopefully you're in good weather. Delhi people, I'm assuming that many of you are not in Delhi. Hopefully you're in good weather. Delhi is being very bad for the last 2 days. Okay, so what I titled the talk as PhDLife. So I really don't know what's the audience, whether you're already a PhD student, whether you're planning to do a PhD student. Let's get some statistics about who is in the audience, and then I can actually tune the talk accordingly. But before we get into that, please use the chat window for reacting in terms of, as I said, +1, smileys, all kinds of reactions, whatever. Even the questions, please post it there. I'll be happy to take it as I give the talk also. So if you're, how many of you are students? Can you do an S if you're a student? Okay, S. Okay. S undergrad, very nice. How many of you are faculty? F for faculty. Okay, PhD student, Scholar F for faculty, okay. As PhD student, okay, good. I think majority driven as student, I guess, and some PhD students. So therefore, I'm assuming that many of you are still making a decision to do PhD or not. Okay. Can you also type your city that you're coming from, or city from where you're logging into this call? Kolkata, Delhi, Varanasi, Bangalore, Jaipur, Trivandrum, Dhanbad. Very nice. Quite. Melbourne. Okay. Goa. Super good. So good to know from different places that people are joining from Italy. Meaning, if you're okay with it, not now, but by the end of the talk, if you're okay with it, please put your Twitter handle also. That will also help in actually trying and talking about the talk itself. So for people who are going to talk about the talk, right, this talk on social media, feel free to tag me. Those are my social media handles. I saw God's Comats tagging me in a post in the morning saying that this is the plan for the day. It was super nice. So if you end up actually talking about anything that you picked up from this talk, feel free to tag me on social media. Okay. So getting into the disclaimer. So as the story is about only PhDLife. PhDLife, whether you want to make a choice of PhD or you're already in a PhD, what are things to do? The disclaimer here is that all characters, references, stories, experiences shared in this talk are not fictitious. Okay? They're all real stories. They're all either that has happened to me or the people that are around me that I know of. These are all either first-hand experience or second-hand. My own students, I would put that as probably second-hand experience that I'm going to be sharing about. It is just coincidental that you may relate to some of many of them, right? This is just a movie disclaimer, and I'm also hoping that I will keep the movie theme across the talk. I've set up some dialogues and movie references across the talk, so let's see how that goes. Second disclaimer, given that, again, not that all of you are registered for PhD, not that all of you are looking for PhD, so it's kind of slightly diverse. I will try and make sure that there is some content which is everybody will, it will address everybody's questions. And at some point in time, I also have some prescriptive things to try out for PhDLife. If you're interested in, feel free to actually look at that. I'd actually sent out a form to all the audience. I don't know whether all of you are here, but I asked Raj to actually send out a form to all the people who are registered for YRS only, asking them for questions on what I should actually talk about. Right? It's always nice to understand the audience from the perspective of what is it they're interested in knowing from the speaker. It helps me to tune the talk. It helps actually make the conversation also more useful for you. Again, you can use the same thing even now. Feel free to post the questions in the chat. If there is anything that you already think that I should address, I will try and address it by then before I finish the talk. So here are the set of questions. I think about 6 people had responded to this questionnaire. Just about 15 minutes before the talk, I checked. There were about 6 people who had actually responded. Here is a set of questions from 6 people. The first one, I'm not really sure whether this is the right talk. I'm happy to talk about it, but I think this talk may not be the right place to talk about recent success of deep learning, influence in health analytics and social media analysis. I think it's probably for a different forum we can talk about that. But the rest of the questions were very, very relevant. So look, I'm in the industry. How do I move into PhD? And this question about very specifically the various parts for the research career, the challenges one encounters, what is success in research, bridging the gap between academia and industry. All of this was referenced there. I think I've kind of created the content which is touching on many of these questions that post here. I will try and address all of them. If I don't answer all of these questions, or if there's any question that you think you want to talk about, feel free to post it. But by the end of the talk also, I can take it. Here's a reference to the movies. I don't know. I think this movie came in different languages, so you should be able to relate to this movie. So the outline for the talk, which is basically giving you a teaser, is that first is to do or not to do PhD. Right? First is the question itself. Oh, look, I want to make a choice on whether I want to try out to do PhD or not. If that's the stage you are in, the first part of the talk is very much inclined towards the content for that. Second, which is life during PhD, is the major chunk of the talk, basically giving you some life cycle of PhD life itself, saying, okay, where do you start? What kind of activities that happen in between? What do you do when you're at the end of the PhD, all of that. Life after PhD, just 1 or 2 slides, just hinting about what are the paths that are available. Again, we can talk about it as in detail as much as you want. Right? So that's the overall content that I want to cover, which is 1, getting into PhD, deciding whether to take it or not. Second, if you're into PhD, I think that part also will be very useful for people who are deciding to go to PhD. You can actually use that to decide whether you want to get into PhD or not. If you're in PhD, what all happens? And then when you're done with PhD, what are the options around? And if time permits, some deleted seats. I made the talk fully. I kept it for 1 hour, 20 minutes from now. But if time permits, I'll actually take up some scenes that are deleted, which is slides that I deleted to actually discuss about it. Okay, good. Okay. So what is PhD? I think this is a question that I think many references. I'll keep my own life experiences so that it kind of puts into some context and also gives you more insights on how a person like me would have actually made a choice. What is PhD, right? A question about when you're making this choice. I think this I'll let you to actually. I'm assuming that it's actually as big as possible for you to read. The image here basically shows that, look, in school, in high school, you get to know some topic in a very small sense. Then you kind of, in undergrad, you get a better sense. In masters, you kind of get into more details of one vertical. And then you're at this point where nobody knows anything more than what you have already read about, what already exists. That's where you start thinking about our PhD life, right? You really want to do some things, pushing the envelope, pushing the area, pushing the science, so to say, knowledge. All that happens here, right? So that's the point where PhD life actually starts coming into play. And then you push the knowledge, push the science a little bit, right? And that's what this PhD is all about. And then now when you're done with it, people think that you can solve all problems, right? So that's the way that PhD at some point in time, meaning I've gotten those references from people who might know, you have a computer science PhD, so you should be able to fix this problem in computer hardware, right? My computer is not working. You have a PhD in computer science, you should be able to fix it, right? So those are real life questions that sometimes pops up. But this is the zoomed in view, right? The 30,000 feet high view is what is this. But if you really look at it close, your view is that you actually made a lot of interesting progress in an area, and you actually contributed to that area. Right? So that's where I think I would treat PhD as, which is pushing the knowledge that is already known and seeing that whether there is something novel that you can do, which nobody else has done before, and putting all of this together to get your PhD. How does one really get that bump during PhD? It's kind of hard. I think you can. I think if you think about it, writing one paper, so to say, if you were to think about in undergrad, or 2 papers probably, a couple of papers during undergrad to push that envelope is possible. I think putting so to say, bunch of work together and saying that, look, I've actually tried multiple ways of addressing this problem, and I'm showing that it works, is kind of a little hard during the undergrad time, I think. Okay, that's about what a PhD is. Okay, so this is for, again, undergrads, primarily driven for people looking for working on computer science problems, but actually has a real world impact. So Professor Kamal, when he mentioned about my bio, he said that some parts of my PhD thesis actually got used into creating a company. So the left-hand side is the flyer that I had physically posted around in campus in CMU while defending the thesis. Right-hand side of this image is the my first page of my thesis. Right? So this work is basically looking at finding ways to educate people about phishing attacks, but it took this small little idea of embedded training, which from a learning science literature, which is done for last 50, 60 years, taking that idea of, oh, when somebody makes a mistake, can you actually stop them and tell them that, look, you made a mistake and this is how you could have actually avoided making a mistake. Bringing that idea into cybersecurity was the, so to say, that pushing the limit that we tried in the PhD work that I did. Interestingly, at that point in time, it was not that very common. Today, I think there are many, many companies. It's not the Wombat, which company that came out of that was created with this idea of PhishGuru also. It's not the only company now. There are actually 4 or 5 big companies doing only this idea that, look, I can actually send out fake phishing emails to people. For example, let's take now as CODS. You register for YRS. YRS CODS command admin can actually send out an email to you. Let's say, here is a link for Zoom call for today's sessions, and see actually how many of you click on the link. When you click, it's actually an email that is not a real email, but an email coming from CODS command itself. But the link actually takes you to a, so to say, fake website. And there it stops and says, look, you should not have clicked this link because, look, the URL does not have ABC. It is not taking you to the right domain, all of that. That's the idea. And this is very prevalent now. Many companies do it very regularly to understand their employees, to educate people about phishing attacks. Even though that's a small explanation, but it has lots of other technical things that came in during the PhD life. Right? So the reason why I actually use this example as even for undergrads, currently in undergrads or in PhD, is that it's actually interesting to see how you can do some work which you can translate into a technology which people can use, and it can have some impact. Interestingly, it does not have to be the you who should be doing the translation also. Even there could be others who could take your work and translate it. But keep an eye for the problem which can get translated. I think that's the theme that I wanted to emphasize here. Work on problems which can have impact in and around you. Later also this theme will come, which is look for problems also which happens in your own life. So one slide that is very, very relevant to the title of the talk itself is that these are all pictures taken during my PhD life, 6 years at CMU. You can see different shades there, right? Different shades, different years, different probably expressions, right? So I think this is going to be very common during the PhD life. I think if I can take such pictures for many of the friends who are doing PhD during my time, I think we will have very similar pictures. Right? It's going to go through different phases, and I think those are the phases that some phases we'll actually discuss these now. That's the company that came out, which Professor Kamal mentioned, which is called Wombat Security Technologies. And Wombat recently, 2018, March, got actually acquired by a larger security company called Proofpoint. And now the Wombat, the PhishGuru, actually the product, the PhD thesis title that I have, which is PhishGuru, is exactly the product that the company sells, right? So we kept the product name also the same as my PhD thesis title. And recently the Wombat got acquired, and the takeaway from this part. This is basically looking at, again, working on problems which are relevant to the real world, working on problems which can be taken, and technologies can be built which can have some impact on the users. One of the lines that I use in my classes and students that I work with is that you want to work on undergraduate, right? Pushing that knowledge space. You want to work on something where someday, somewhere, somebody will use what you did. Right? If you're able to translate it and give it to them as a sort of the technology, well and good. But if not, do work which can get translated. Why do PhD? Okay, can I get some answers for why do PhD? Okay. So can I get some answers on why do PhD? Why do you think people do PhD for? Or why would you decide to do PhD? Again, these are points by which we can understand that you're also with us in the talk. You're not slept. Okay, to know what PhD is, interesting. Develop a skill set to analyze different problems. Nice. Make a contribution towards your field of interest. Okay. No PhD. Okay, nice. Become an expert. Contribute to an area. Okay, what else? Develop a skill set for attacking many problems. So Rasida is saying develop an ability to think. Interesting, but I don't know whether you need a PhD to ability to think. I'm assuming that every part of education is making us to think. Sometimes even not having education also makes people to think. Getting to work with academic researchers, learn a novel, learn solve problem, academic requirement, very nice. Anshul has, right? So if you want to be a professor, that's probably a required condition for becoming a professor. Explore one particular field in depth and fill gaps, have fun as a student, very nice. Rukma is saying have fun. Okay, good. So I think that's kind of gives us an understanding of what people think about why do a PhD, right? Starting from just for having fun, getting to know what PhD is. I don't know whether somebody would actually spend 5-6 years in just saying that, oh, I want to get to know what PhD is, so let me go try. But still, that was the first answer we got. From there to the point of saying, oh, I want to contribute to an area, I want to actually make a dent in the area, whatever that area is, I want to become a faculty, all of that, right? So that's the whole spectrum of why would anybody want to do a PhD? Interesting, right? So here is one of the prescriptive ways. So this is for people who are currently thinking about whether they want to get into PhD. But I later have a slide on if you're already a PhD student, how do you decide on actually what problems to work on? Okay? So here is what I would this table, this kind of mechanism, I use it in my own sort of say decision making. And this is an idea that I picked up from a book, which is, so why do PhD? In this case, the rows are basically doing PhD, working for a company, starting a company. You can have all the lists that you want, right? Whatever the options in front of you are. Right? So this is while I'm making a decision for doing a PhD. So the first, again, columns are also very, very subjective. You can add as many as you want. It's only an indicator of what I actually think that how you can actually make a decision for whether you want to do PhD. Right? So for example, doing PhD satisfaction factor, right? For example, I could say that at least when I was deciding to go for a PhD, I was already working for a company, which I undergraduate 5 years. And I'm like, look, I think that whatever I'm trying to do is not probably the best use of my interest right now. I think we need to do something more exciting in my life, right? Satisfaction factor of what I was doing then was actually pretty low. So I was thinking that, look, pushing the envelope, all that we have discussed right now is actually possible doing a PhD. So can I actually go try it doing a PhD? Because my satisfaction level here, again, the values you can put in the table, it could be from 1 to 10, where 1 is least, in this case, satisfactory, 10 is being the most satisfactory. Right? So working for a company for me, probably at that time, probably would have been 2, or let's take 4, 2 to 4. Right? Doing PhD, at that point in time, I was actually thinking that my satisfaction level would be a little more. Let's take for now 6. I was not really into starting a company. I could even give a 0 at that point in time. Right? Career growth opportunities. So I was, as some of you said that you wanted to become a faculty, I somewhere in the decision making, I wanted to be a faculty. So I thought that, look, getting a PhD is probably a required condition. So we should actually look at that. So therefore, again, my values would be pretty high here. All right. So that's how you fill the table. I will let you to think about it and fill the table. Financial growth status, skills, skills, background needed, amount of groundwork already done. Right? So all of this could be conditions on the basis by which you're actually making a choice. It could be very different. The columns can be added, the columns can be very different for you if you're making a choice. What would this table have? This table is not going, it's not a magical table that is going to give you the answer that you want, but this table will definitely help you to make a choice, one, more informed. The critical part about doing this exercise is actually filling the values very judiciously. Right? In terms of not being, I want to financial growth, right? Yeah, PhD also the growth in, let's say when I finish the PhD, the satisfaction of me getting a salary very high would be 8, or working for a company in 5 years, I'll probably make the same money 8, or if I start a company, I'll also make the similar. So this is not going to help make any choice. I've seen students, when I've recommended these kind of things, these kind of tables for undergraduates, when they do this exercise, they come back to me with such table. Because I think students are also trying to optimize everything in front of them, right? They want to be they want to get an admission into a very good school for grad school. They want to actually have a best offer from that institute. They also want to have the best idea to actually run a company. It's not going to happen, right? So I think there are many qualities that go into every aspect of this. So you have to figure out what qualities you have. Depending on that, you can actually decide what you want to do. Right? This table will definitely help you what you should not look at. For example, in my case, when I was deciding, so let's take when I was deciding going into the PhD, I'll also tell you using the same table, finishing the PhD also. Getting into a PhD, right? It definitely felt that, look, I don't want to work for a company because that's not helping. I'm already working for a company, software company, whatever. At that point in time, it was not helping. Second, I'm not really up for starting a company. Right? It ruled out some options very, very evidently, which may be otherwise also clear at some point. So let's take when I finished the PhD, a similar table can be filled. When I finished the PhD, again, the bottom two, one, if you look at it, the options could be instead of doing a PhD, becoming a faculty. Faculty was always there in the mind of getting in. But working for a company and starting a company is also ruled out if you think about putting this table again for me. It was not there. Even though my PhD thesis helped create a company, all that, I was not in the so to say mood, or I was not in a way by which I can actually run the company myself, right? But I wanted to create technologies which will create more companies like that, rather than actually take a technology and run the technology as a company myself. That's just a quality. Meaning, I think we have to live with whatever cards we have got to play with. I think that qualities are one of the cards that we have to play with. Did that make sense? Can you do a +1 if it gave you some idea about what's going on, how to make a choice? Okay, some people are awake. Okay, so I would, again, later in the slides, I'll show you how to actually use this to decide on what research project to work on also. I asked the list, the slide before, I asked you a list of why do you want to do PhD? I think all of you nailed all the answers in the slide. Want to be a faculty, want to be one among the experts, respect in the society. Some people also have that. So for example, I've had students who show up when we ask the question in the interview saying, oh, why do you want to do PhD? They'll say that I want doctor with my name, right? So that's the motivation for somebody to actually think about getting a PhD. Sometimes it's actually peer pressure also. Peer pressure did not come in any of the answers that you gave, but peer pressure was also a reason why people end up actually at least joining a PhD program, if not completing it. Right? Curiosity, I think curiosity came up in one of the answers, which is I want to try out what's going on. Want to shift from industry to academia. You saw one of the questions that was posed. I'm assuming that some of you are in the call right now who are actually in the industry and want to get into PhD. Yeah, Kaushik, I understand that, curiosity, right? Just for fun, right? Somebody said that, look, I want to know what PhD is all about, right? So very, very nicely answers that you gave, which in at least answers that I was thinking about why anybody would want to do a PhD. Yeah, transition from industry. I think this is one. I think there's a large pool of students, of currently of people working in the industry who are thinking about this PhD thing, because I think you'll see we've been organizing some Ask Me Anything in the last 3-4 months about just this PhD life itself. We get lots of questions about transitioning, moving from industry to PhD. So here are some thoughts. Again, right-hand side is the dialogue from a movie, which is emphasis on the point that I will get across here. You should know what you want. I think one of the things that the recruitment, when you're applying for a PhD program to any institute, I think I've seen at least 3-4 institutes where I'm part of these PhD recruitment process. When student comes, when the applications from industry, the expectation is that you little bit know where you want to go. You're not in the stage of look, I'll try a few things. I will see. I'll take up some courses. Then I will decide. I think it's okay, fair enough that you can decide later. But at least a sense of, look, I want to work on sort of say information retrieval problems. I want to work on database problems, right? I want to work on social media. Something like that should be there. Cybersecurity, right? Those kind of things they expect you to have. So please have that if you're trying to do this transition. Try out some courses, right? So I think institutes also provide you options to take some courses, or I think it's also easy to work out with some professors wherever you would like to go do a PhD. Ask professors to let you take a course and take the course and understand a little bit of whether that's the direction that you want to go. I think today you can also use NPTEL platforms, Coursera platforms to do it. Try out NPTEL because I think there's a lot of because if you're thinking of PhD within India, I think those are the professors that you may be a good option for you to even try out for your PhD life. Do some projects as part of the courses, or even outside the courses, please do projects. I think that allows, so we have had sort of say experiences here where people from industry work with us for projects, not registered for PhD, nothing. They're working with us on a project, probably with some students in campus. And then this kind of becomes more interesting for them, for us, and it kind of translates into a PhD admission. Right? So that's, I think, is probably a requirement if you were to think about transitioning from industry to PhD. So one key component of doing that is that managing family, job, PhD is extremely hard, right? Very, very hard. I think you really have to have a huge amount of motivation to do that. Huge amount of actually family support, social support to actually decide on doing a PhD. Meaning, even though I said that many people actually come from industry to start a PhD, but I think the ratio of people joining and finishing is actually pretty low. People finishing is actually lower than the normal, let's take full-time PhD because of various reasons, right? So therefore, make sure that you have that urge. That's the reason why the dialogue movie is here. I think you're going to get a very Tamilian accented person living in Hindi, a person living in Delhi Hindi. कहते हैं अगर किसी चीज को दिल से चाहो, which I'm assuming that people wanting from industry. I think the statement is good for others also, but I put it here for people joining from industry. तो पूरी कायनात उसे तुमसे मिलाने की कोशिश में लग जाते हैं. Right? So you courses, projects, students, network, all of that can come together if you actually have that motivation to get into PhD program. Right? Okay, so Arjun, not necessarily Arjun. So quick answer, not necessarily. We have had people who do with only undergraduate come. I think the key component is taking the courses either before admission, meaning after admission, so you have to do required courses, but getting connected with the professor, getting connected with the faculty, with their sort of say research area, alignment with their work, showing interest, being part of some projects. I think those things only help you. Unfortunately, Swati, I'm assuming that you're saying red carpet for people from industry to academia, but it's going to be hard. Okay, good. Feel free to stop me for any questions if you have, but I think people are already doing it, so please continue doing it. Arjun, I hope you got the answer, Arjun. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's the part, a little bit about deciding on PhD. What are the things that we want to think about transitioning, all of that. But now I think the later slides also are very, very valid for you to decide whether you want to do PhD. But the way I'm thinking about is that now when you are into a PhD program, what all happens? You can use that to decide whether you want to do it or not. Right? Okay, life. Yeah. So this one is I was giving a hint when I was replying to Arjun also about the advisor. I think if there is one thing that you really want to spend more time on is actually finding an advisor, right? Spend a lot more time on deciding on the advisor. So trade-offs. So there's always this question about, look, I want to. There is an option of actually working with a very senior professor very senior professors versus a junior professor who just started his faculty career. Right? The trade-offs. So the trade-offs could be senior professor giving you less time, junior professor giving you more time in the work, senior professors giving you less time for your reviews of the paper, like that. Junior professor probably working with you and writing the draft of the paper itself. Senior professors, the advantages, if you should look at the pros, if you look at it, you can say that the network of the senior professors is maybe very, very useful compared to a person who just started. The kind of problems sometimes the senior professor worker has a lot more impact, a lot more sort of visibility because they have gone through this process many more times. They understand what kind of problems may have impact on the society, impact on the sort of say research community, all of that. That's probably a plus point for a senior professor. Right? So these are the questions that you want to weigh if you have an option, right? If you have an option, you really want to consider, and again, it's a choice wherever, it's a personal choice that you will make depending on the answers that you have for these kind of questions. Understanding sort of working style. I think I personally myself have had troubles at some point in time with deciding on things that we do with PhD students, right? So for example, working on a problem, PhD student want to take it in one direction, you want to actually take it in a different direction, that kind of thing. Or even just the philosophies of what kind of problems to work on, how to take research, how to actually create a career out of this PhD life, all of that itself may be conflicting at some point in time. So you just want to make sure that you understand the advisor's views. Advisor-advisee relationship. Sometime during my PhD, somebody told me that advisor-advisee relationship is also like Saas-Bahu relationship, right? Daughter-in-law, mother-in-law relationship. You want to be together because there's lots of benefits about it. But you cannot be together because there's lots of actually sort of say difficulties in being together also. Right? So that's the component that you want to really keep in mind. The picture on the left-hand bottom is my thesis advisor. This is a picture that I took in 2018, about 9 years after I graduated, and I had not met her even once in this 9 years. Right? So this was 2018, which is after the Wombat acquisition, we actually met together in Pittsburgh. And why is there a sort of say a little bit of emphasis on this know your advisors? Because I think once an advisor, there's lots of things you can go back to them. Right? Currently, I end up writing letter of recommendations for my student who graduated in 2015. My first student who graduated, you end up actually writing a letter of recommendation for something, right? Some connections that they want, some networking benefits that the students get. There is even options of continuing to work with the advisor. People can make a choice of whether you want to continue working with your advisor or not. Even technically also. Collaborative projects can also happen after graduating. In this context, I like this dialogue in Dear Zindagi movie. I'm sure many of you are actually, how many of you have watched this movie, Dear Zindagi? Can you do a +1 if you've watched the movie? Actually, all the movies, when the reference comes, please tell +1 if you watched the movie. I think earlier movie was Om Shanti Om, and this movie is Dear Zindagi, right? So here the discussion here, I think Alia Bhatt and Shah Rukh have is that, look, I think, I mean, this love relationship is too taxing, right? The expectations of this one relationship is very, very high. because you really want to find that one. I think that's what Alia Bhatt actually argues, saying that it's so hard to get that one person to have all these qualities that I'm looking for. Shahrukh kind of explains that, look, it's actually extremely hard to get one person, but he actually goes ahead to say that, look, we should have some relationship, a book relationship. Let's grab some coffee relationship, music relationship, right? Things like that. So the point here is that do not expect your advisor to have all the qualities that the way that you would like to have also. There is going to be compromises, which actually happens in SaaS-Bahoo relationship also, right? So there is compromises in many relationships, but here, given the importance of this advisor relationship, I think you really want to be careful about the choices that you make. Okay. Yeah, set the expectations. I will let you to read the cartoon for a second. Set the expectations correctly. This slide and the next slide is basically arguing about that. So this is also reference to my difference in the junior faculty and a senior faculty, right? Saying that what student wish their professor would be like to, which a student is thinking that, oh, professor will actually give you the idea, professor will actually give you the directions of writing, going in the problem, even helping you with the draft very closely, all that. But the bottom of the slide actually shows you a different view of the interaction between the student and the advisor. Right, the advisor says that I will review your paper as soon as possible. Translation, I will get it done sometime in the century. Expectations, if you set properly, I think some of these can be avoided. Some of these, not the interactions cannot be avoided. I think the so to say effect of the interactions can be avoided. I will let you to read this one also. Right. So yeah, these are interactions with advisors. Okay. Now that you've made a choice of deciding on the, so to say, advisor. So also keep in mind the advisor has a relationship with the institute. I did not do the emphasis on the institute because I think many a times there are students who have made choices not from the institute point of view, but from the advisor point of view. So I kind of kept it at the advisor itself. Okay. So now that you've made a choice of the advisor, which means you've gotten admission to a PhD program or the process of thinking about what all happens after getting in the admission, mandatory coursework is a requirement. I think cutting across the world, except for a few countries, I think this required coursework is part of the PhD expectations itself. Right? So the different institutes will have different expectations for coursework. For example, PhdLife Delhi has the expectations. Somebody asked a question, right? Undergraduate versus masters. So the whoever asked that question, the quick answer that I gave is no, you don't need to have a master's when you get into a PhD. Transitioning from industry or some question came. You don't need to have a master's getting into a PhD. But having the master's, if you have a master, the coursework in PhD just changes. For an undergrad, for a place like PhdLife Delhi, we expect you to do 32 credits. If you have a master's degree already, you get 16 credits off and you can do only 16 credits in the PhD program. 16 credits is about 4 courses. Right? So these expectations, this math, if you look at it, is very different in different places. Right? Professor Kamal is at PhdLife Hyderabad. There, the expectations of number of courses is very different than PhdLife Delhi. Take a variety of courses. I think, so my personal experience of taking a variety of courses, I think it comes up later also for a different reason. But I've taken courses across different schools at CMU. So my PhD was in School of Computer Science, but there is social science, there's business school, there's engineering and policy school. So I've taken courses in multiple different courses from multiple different departments and schools. It just helps you to get a different perspective. For example, even the core idea that I said about my PhD thesis, which is this embedded training, technically it's called, that part actually came out of a course that I took called Intelligent Tutoring Systems from a course which is Cognitive Science and Human-Computer Interaction together that the professor was teaching. Right? So therefore, this kind of course picking, required courses, you don't have a choice, right? Required courses, you just have, for example, even my own experience, required courses, there's a list of things, algo, machine learning, blah, 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 right? All that you just have to do, there's no choice. mean, you probably have a choice of what are the different courses in that bucket of algo course, but you can't really say that, no, I won't take an algo course. That's not possible. Whereas after you're done with this mandatory courses, just explore courses that are relevant to you. Meaning, I think of late students have started not taking courses away from more than the required courses. I think that's a behavior, that's a trend that we see in PhD Delhi, and I've seen in other institutes also. Required is 32. These are the buckets, just do it and finish it. I think explore more courses. Yeah. Qualifier exam. So qualifier exam also is kind of different in different places. For example, PhD Delhi has this comprehensive exam, which is after, I think before the 5th semester of the PhD, you have to do this comprehensive exam. And then PhD thesis defense. So 2.5 to 5, that's how it works. Whereas the CMU model that I did was, it's a proposal that I have to submit, right? And then a defense. There are institutes where they do depth versus breadth exam, which is a written exam that you'll have to do for both your breadth and the depth. Meaning CMU also has a different exam, where Engineering and Public Policy School has a different style, where they say that, look, we'll give you 1 week for one question, which is a small question, saying that, for example, one of the questions that was during my PhD life for a friend of mine got was, oh, look, there will be a meteor which will hit the Earth very soon. In a week or so, it will hit the Earth. Find ways to actually save people on the Earth. Find ways to save the Earth. That's all. The question is that much, and then you get 1 week to address the question. Different ways of actually studying, understanding whether you actually understood, so to say, the breadth and the depth. Right? So this also you want to keep in mind how the qualifier exams are scheduled. Okay, so often during PhD, one encounters the question, should I quit? When should one actually quit? Versus when should one perhaps just work on motivating themselves to keep going? So Anupam, let's take this question at the end, Anupam, if it's okay with you. I think this is a very interesting question. Let's keep looking at other content. I think if it gets addressed in other slides, we will drop it, but if not, we can come back to this question. Is that okay, Anupam? Sure. So, okay. So explore a bit. Now that you've done your courses, now the next part is, look, I want to next, or sometimes they can go together. Some institutes where the coursework mandatory and your research work goes hand in hand. So when you're doing that, I think one of the things that you really want to keep in mind is actually try and explore a bit in terms of the problem statements. Earlier I said that mandatory courses done, explore a bit of courses. Now the argument that I'm making is that, look, you should actually try and get some projects done in some variety, which will actually allow you to understand where within the scope of the problems itself that you want to work on. Like, for example, earlier I said the databases, social media, cybersecurity. That direction is clear. But even there, PhD is not going to be at the level of cybersecurity, right? PhD is going to be at the level of educating people about phishing attacks, building technologies for that, finding machine learning algorithms to find out whether an email is a phishing email or not. It will be at that level is what your thesis statement will look like, right? So some examples of my own students. One student actually started off with CAPTCHA. She has an interesting paper on CAPTCHA, cybersecurity, usable security, all of that. Then she went and did a prior paper on privacy. Then she went and did another paper on usable security. And then she decided that, look, none of these three are interesting and exciting for me, even though they're all connected. None of this is exciting for me. I'll actually work on something called social media and policing. Her PhD thesis ended up being an interesting piece of work that we have had some impact with the work that she did, even in the society that we actually see now also. Our PhD work getting referred in many different ways outside the academic domain also. Second example, this is a student who started out with cyberbullying, pedophile. These are all, again, problems which is online safety, if you were to put a bigger bucket on top of it. I'll actually do something else. What does this allow you? This allows you to actually become one of the, so one keyword that my advisor actually emphasized during my PhD life is this. I think this is what every so to say experience of PhD should give you, which is that can you actually take up some problem and work on it yourself, right? So this experience of working on different problems and then different methodologies also. Actually, Heinz School at CMU as the PhD expectation itself, that your first paper should be, Heinz School is this public policy school, public policy management faculty from these departments are there. So what they expect is your first paper should be on quantitative methods. Your second paper should be on qualitative methods. I mean, you can organize it in any order that you want, but the expectation itself is that methodologically you should be actually doing different kind of research in your PhD itself. It's a requirement. What I'm saying in computer science that you want to do is that you want to try out different areas, which gives you a flavor of how to actually attack different problems. Because at the end of the day, I think, as I said before, when you finish PhD, people are going to expect you to solve problems. The reference, yeah, so this given that the Dear Zindagi movie +1 has already happened, I'm assuming that you will recollect the dialogue in this part of the movie where Shah Rukh actually argues that, look, you want to buy a chair, before deciding, you actually sit on multiple chairs to decide which chair to buy. So when you're deciding on a PhD problem, try out a few things and then decide on which problem do you want to actually work on. For a PhD, I think every problem that I mentioned before is actually something students worked on to getting research output. Okay. Is the dialogue relevant to this conversation? +1, yes. Okay, Prahlad. Okay. Well, Quartz Command itself is saying yes. I don't know who's managing Quartz Command, but nice. So now that we have decided that, okay, I want this direction, I've understood that, I've played around with different kinds of problems, but let's think about problem creations itself, right? Problem creation itself has, I mean, I think it's a process. It's a process by which you can actually think about creating problems, understanding, I think, problems which to work on. Okay, so ideas strike any time. Right? So unfortunately, I see PhD students think that, oh, I'll go to lab. So New Year resolution, right? I'll go to lab from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. from January 1st. I will see how well I can do my PhD, right? Or you expect that, look, I will actually slog overnight. 3 days, I will slog overnight to actually develop something. It may happen if you're extremely smart, if you are capable of doing these things, it probably will work. I think majority of the times ideas don't come when you are actually saying that now let me create ideas. For example, left one, I think all of you will know. The right one is my own personal life. So this is actually Forbes Avenue, 5000 Forbes Avenue, CMU. That's the address. If you Google 5000 Forbes Avenue, that's the building you will get, which is the Heinz College of CMU. That's where we get off, take the bus to go back home. And so my personal experience of creating my PhD idea, which is the crux that I've already said before, was actually some scribbling in the paper from home to CMU. My home to CMU was about 9 minutes, 10 minutes bus with about 6-7 stops. And that's exactly the same 61C is the bus that I took from home to come to campus. And some scribbling. I'm not saying that I'm not at all arguing that the entire PhD thesis was written in the bus of 9 minutes or 10 minutes drive. No. I think that nucleus of the idea, what I want to work on, what is that I should try? Why should I try this? The arguments of making that this is probably the best idea that I want to spend my PhD life on came in that 9 minutes. And I scribbled some idea, the next log that I had with my PhD thesis advisor, I talked about it and she was interested, and that's where my PhD is. And that's the story of creating an idea, right? So therefore, be prepared for ideas to come anytime. So I used to work with some professors at CMU who actually used to argue that you should live with your problem. If you don't live with your problem, it's hard for problems to make progress, right? For you to get solutions of addressing the problem. There's also another theme here, right? If you've identified the good research problem to work, that is all halfway gone in your PhD life, halfway gone into solving the problem also, because finding the good questions is extremely, extremely hard. Okay, this is a slide that I mentioned earlier about, we'll come back to the same table to deciding on a problem, right? Okay, question, what to do when your guide is asking me to change your research areas after 2 to 3 years? Interesting problem, Amit. What do you do when your guide is asking? Okay, it's coming back again. Yeah, so I think, Amit, these are all very, so to say, specific sort of challenges that will come. I think I will use trade-offs. I can even do similar table and probably figure out whether it is possible. I think the question is whether you want to, is it far away from your interest? Because PhD, one of the other things that the PhD does is that PhD gives you this sort of say chapa on you for that area for some time. You can change. For example, I myself, I've done a little bit of a dabbling around after PhD to do tryout areas. But during PhD, and if you are, so to say, finishing your PhD, people expect you to be in that area for some years, work in that area, right? People, even in the industry, people will think that, oh, you published in, so to say, cybersecurity, you should know cybersecurity area, right? So therefore, it's a choice that you have to make whether you want to change to the area that your advisor wants you to do. Again, trade-offs to look at, or you want to think about, no, that's not the area that I want to spend my time on, and look at other options. Amit, that's the quick answer. We can come back to this question if you want more. Is that okay, Amit? Yeah. So areas, again, this is from my experience, my own experience. The topic one was NLP, information retrieval, cybersecurity. These were my options in front of me when I was deciding to do which area to work on in my PhD life. And this was a sort of a dinner table conversation with the person that I was actually sharing my room at that point in time, what topics to work on. And this is how we were making the choices, right? He was actually working in NLP, machine learning, in those topics. And we were actually arguing that, oh, look, what areas to work on. So in my case, again, completely personality driven. I think it's very, very subjective, because every PhD student, every PhD path is kind of unique, even though you can say that, look, all of us took mandatory courses, all of us took published papers, all of us did X, Y, Z. I think every PhD life would be very unique. For example, Amit is asking a question about, look, advisor is asking me to change. I did not have that problem. Right? So while making the choice, I personally, my characteristics, I wanted to try out something where less of understanding is being done already. For example, NLP, information retrieval, during 2002-3 years, there's already a lot of work done. The PhD student, both of us were potential PhD students at that point in time. We were arguing, so he was saying that, look, there is lots of work that is done in NLP, IR, which I have to actually understand, to build on, to get this, sort of say, problems to work on. And then the other option that at that point in time, I was taking a security class, privacy class. So I was arguing that, look, there's so much of interesting problems that one could work on this area. And that's when I narrowed down, saying, okay, let's explore this area of sort of usable security, privacy, cybersecurity, all of that, which is how I made a choice of deciding on this compared to these things. It's a real life dinner table conversation. The columns are opportunities to contribute, which is in my case, I said that, look, less of area, not less, I'm not saying that less meaning quantified number of papers or something. Not a lot of problems have been addressed. For example, even if you look at cybersecurity right now, we can actually argue that some aspects of cybersecurity we don't even know well right now. That's the kind of thing that I'm saying. Professional opportunities, in my case, I think it was, so to say, so if I were to fill this table for myself, NLP 3-4, IR 3-4, at that point in time, I was thinking that this would be like 7. Professional opportunities may have been the same, because I was thinking of actually becoming a faculty, a peer health, community health. Scilab, which is what I was part of at CMU, had huge amount of help here, 6 to 7, let's take. Similarly, probably these things, there's good labs around there. Skills background, I did not have a lot of background. So here's another way of thinking about it, right? You don't need to have, for example, skill set background at that point in time. Probably my skill set background here was probably, let's take 5 to 6, if you were to take that as intermediate of some understanding. I was not really good at those topics also then. This would have been probably only a 2. But that's okay, right? There's no reason why you need to actually look at areas only where you have skills and background enoughly when you start also. The argument that I was making was, look, I think it looks like it's niche, not a lot. And if you go back and look at some of the PhD times work that I've done, I think it helps to see that it kind of opened up a different way of thinking that, look, cybersecurity solutions also can have topics from sociology, topics from psychology. I think that's the connection that we made. Not just me, there are 3-4 of us PhD work at the same time we were working on. People who are actually addressing the similar kind of solutions. Okay, luck favors prepared minds is connected to even the slide on my bus experience. Just have to have a lot of awareness of what is going on in that area, a lot of understanding of live with the problem. I think finally, if you just live with the problem, things will show up. Okay, I'll take a quick, 30 seconds. Any questions still here? Any thoughts? +1 if you're okay with the content until now. Any comments? Okay, that's another point. Considering any field that has been developing for many decades, is one expected to know a lot before PhD is doing explorations. Arjun, actually, I think one of the recent conferences, actually, this is like, I think there are tweets talking about, if you just look at #PhDLife, which is also the title of the talk, it's actually a hashtag which people use about PhD on Twitter. So you'll find actually in the last couple of months, people have been saying that the applications that they're seeing in this fall, where the students actually almost already have a lot of work done in that area, it's becoming more and more hard to recruit PhD students. They just have to put the papers together and say, that give me the PhD. Right? People have gone to that level. I think that the sort of say applications, grad school applications has become super competitive, that students already have done many things that you're saying, but I'm not too sure whether that is required, right? So you should actually look at some of these conversations that we have been having about PhD life itself. It is for you to argue that this is my interest. So for example, in my own case, I did not have a paper when I applied for CMU PhD, right? I did not, as I said, no, I did not even have the great understanding of the topic that I was actually going to work on, privacy, usable security, all of that. Right? It's an argument that you want to make. It's an argument that I see students actually making even now. My students are applying for PhD, right? In the last 3 years, we've had fabulous students of PhdLife Delhi who has worked with me, who's gone on to being part of very interesting research groups across the world. Their arguments only are there. They don't have any. I think some people have some papers, but it's not a requirement. You're saying lower skill level is a better choice. Rukma, I think lower skill level, not necessarily for me. Lower skill level, the argument that I'm making is that if the area is niche, if there is a lot of fertile problems to work on, people are talking about a lot of interesting directions in a domain, then I think it's an interesting direction to go. That's the argument that I'm making, Rukma. Is that making sense, Rukma? And can I get +1 from others? I just saw +1 from Pooja about talk until now. If you guys are in sync with me, can you do a +1? Okay, cool. Let's do some qualities during PhD. So I have about 26 minutes now. Let's see how much I actually covered. Some qualities during PhD, right? Motivation, persistence, time management. I think one of the critical idea that you really want to spend a lot of time is time management, because I think time management is one skill that's becoming more and more essential anywhere now, because of so many things that are happening, because of so many things that you have to actually manage. I think it's necessary. Journal writing, keep writing your ideas. One of the deleted scenes will come if we end up going there, is to actually look at this journal actually very regularly if you have generated ideas. Right? Curiosity, Curious George is the movie there. Again, both these movies, please watch if you have not watched it. Will create so much of interesting insights for looking at PhD life itself. Both has actually references, so to say, themes that you can pick up if you're thinking about PhD life. live with the problem, which I've already said. Procrastination, I think this is very tied up with the time management, where you actually, there's a trade-off between working on getting things done which are urgent versus getting things done that are important. These two are sometimes not necessarily aligned. We end up as people trying to get things done, we end up spending a lot of time on urgent things, but miss out on important things, which is what this slide and the next slide is arguing. That the important thing is about here, which is on working on thesis, never gets done. All other things are getting done, right? Whereas working on thesis just doesn't get time share, which is something you want to keep in mind. So if you already know it, if you already use it, please use it effectively. Please let me know. I can just skip and not spend a lot of time management, right? Calendar. My PhD clinic experience, PhD clinic is something that Professor Kamal said that I'm a little active on the ACM circles. That's one of the activity that I spend time on, which is to get PhD students spend an hour with a mentor on their area of research, right? Any PhD student, let's say I'm a PhD student working in social media analysis for something, the student makes a request and we sort of say do a matchmaking for spending an hour with a mentor who can actually give some insights on the problems, right? I don't see PhD students actually using calendar well. I send out calendar invite to the mentor and the student. So situations a student don't even accept the calendar invite when I explicitly state in my email saying, accept the calendar invite so that we know that you've seen this calendar invite, or people accept the calendar invite and don't show up in the slot when it's actually scheduled. Lots of things are going on. So my request is please think about how to actually manage calendar better. Trello is again another application which many of the students also use now in terms of managing the tasks. So okay, I can set up saying, here you can also do collaborative ones. You can set up tasks for yourself, tasks for others, follow it up very well in Trello. Another one that I see mostly students use these days is Notion. Notion is, again, you can keep it private, you can keep it public, where you actually, instead of writing sort of say journal types, but keeping it online and keeping it actually sort of say shared with others and using it more effectively. That's what Notion is. Right? Please think about it. I think all of this will help you start thinking about managing your time better. Quick slide for you to digest. Okay. Yeah, so this is something probably it is also the institute that you go to will have the sort of the factor how much you transform. Let's say if it was alpha, that factor probably is dependent on the institute that you go to, I guess. I had a huge amount of effect, including, for example, the cap that I'm wearing right now is my grad school, right? Effect of sort of say things that I've learned from there, the way I went and the way I got out is phenomenally different, right? Huge level of impact that the grad school has had in many different ways. Thinking about sort of say working on problems which are around me, right? Translating your research into technologies, translating your research into actually something that which can go into a newspaper level content, right? Converting your research into somebody who to your grandmother or grandfather is a skill that you need to have to get your research to go to general public in that case. One of our research actually went into Hasan Minhaj's show. If you look up our researchers, sort of say Selfie, Kilfi, and Hasan Minhaj, one of the show actually talked about our research in the show, right? So that's all thanks to CMU for that, right? So allow the PhD to get that transformation happening, right? You should definitely keep yourself aware of the transformation that should go on with you. For example, in my case, I have tennis, golf, my friends have wine tasting, photography. In their transcript, we all took courses at CMU for these topics while doing PhD. Right? Make friends outside your domain. There's even research to show that people whose work people outside their domain look at and sort of say appreciate. If you were to even look at the sort of say empirical way of looking at it, the citations number increases, right? If you have people from outside domain actually looking at your research. These are all recent research. The last 2-3 years, there's a lot of research going on about actually how to present your research, how actually to promote your research also. Read topics outside your domain. The book on the right top is actually a book that I read during my PhD life. During that time, I did not understand the effect of it. I was asked to read this book. There's a chapter called Planetology in the book. I can tell you different chapters in that book. We went through the chapter. We made slides of the chapter. We understood what is going on in the chapter. All of this we're doing as part of our PhD life. As part of becoming an independent researcher, while I'm doing a PhD in computer science, I was actually doing reading this book on planetology. Right? I've seen people do similar things in physics, similar things in chemistry, but doing a PhD in computer science. Ask questions, even if it's early when you're, so for example, this talk itself, right? As generally we're tuned into joining talk, being quiet. That's why I end up actually asking people to do +1, say something. I even requested whether video can be on. Those things actually allow you to participate also a little bit, which we don't generally otherwise. Otherwise, we join into a call, listen to the call, we just drop off the call and done with the talk, right? Here is a metric that I learned from one of my senior PhD students. During my PhD life, he told me this, which is if you attend a talk, right? If you attend a talk, when the talk ends, the speaker who is giving the talk should know you by either, because when you introduce yourself, oh, I'm PK, I'm asking the question here, I can say that, look, Hariharan is saying something, right? The speaker should know that you are in the room. Not to disturb him, not to make fuss out of the talk, but ask questions about the talk, ask intelligent questions, ask sensible questions, even if it's silly. I think that's why I explicitly stated that even if it's silly, because there are lot many people who want to know that silly question. Lot many people in the room who probably ask a question does not have the courage to ask. Why don't you become that courageous person in asking that question? It's the skill that he's doing fabulously well in the US now as a faculty. This skill I picked up from him, saying that when you finish the talk, the person should know your name, or at least, oh, this person who wore the black jacket was the person who asked me some interesting questions. Right? So that's a perspective. Strength of weak ties, I think relationship, make friends, all of that is very helpful. Please read this paper if you're interested in knowing more technical details about strength of weak ties. But weak ties are the ones which actually helps you extremely well to get, for example, job opportunities. For example, other opportunities that you want to, let's take transition from the industry to academia. Weak ties are the people who bring in a lot of opportunities. This is very well established research work. People have proven again and again this. So I'm just using that as a theme here. Create more weak ties in your PhD life also. So transformation. Transformation can happen in many different ways. Here is an example of a transformation. 5 of my 7 PhD students that have graduated actually have already got married during PhD life. All of these weddings. So here is one. Here is the second one. So this is the first one. That's the second marriage. That's the third marriage. I have pictures like this for other weddings also. And in my case, I was already married before I started my PhD. Right? Let the PhD life transform you in different ways. One of the way I think is also marriage. Student travel. Student travel is also another one which lets you to transform. I actually think the student travels, for example, in my students, so all of them are my students in this picture. So there's this and this, right? They are my students who have traveled, and currently this student Vedant is actually a PhD student at UMD. Just look up Vedant Nanda. The kind of work that he's doing now is phenomenal. Fairness, transparency, the kind of problems that they're working on is super exciting. And it's also so happy to see that for students who work with you is actually doing some interesting work, right? So travel also helps you to make connections, right? The weak tie starts coming in when you actually travel. Unfortunately, we're having PhDLife in this format, but otherwise we would have also traveled to make some weak ties with people who are attending the talk. Okay, few more interesting thoughts, and then we can wrap up. 16 more minutes. So be active on social media, even though so can you do a +1 if you're on Twitter? +1 if you're on Twitter. Yeah, hopefully all of you will talk about this talk and please tag PhDLife. please put the hashtag COTSCommat2021. I think that's the hashtag that COTSCommat is using. Please use the hashtag and do a post, right? Be active. Look at this. These are. So if you look at, he's a professor at University of Michigan, Chicago. He's a professor at University of Southern California, USC. They're all very popular people. Go look at their research. Extremely popular people, but they're also super active on social media. I'll tell you some reasons why that is actually happening these days. Because I think people want to show, for example, in this tweet, if you see Ben, Ben is talking about a paper. Ben is talking about a paper that they published, and it's actually showed up in New York Times, the research, and he's posting about it, and he's having a conversation with people about it. So the takeaway from this for a PhD student or a student in this call is that be active, interact with people, interact with. I mean, I think all of you must be on Facebook. You probably are on Instagram. This generation is probably active on Instagram and looking at sort of the pictures, but you can actually try and make use of it for your benefit also, right? Interact with researchers on social media. People left, right, and center are actually talking about any topic on sort of say research that they're working on. You should figure out who are the people whom you should follow, read the paper, make a comment on the paper, retweet the tweets, make a comment on the paper, ask them about the paper also. Right? You read it. LinkedIn also, for sure. Uncan is saying LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think lesser of this social media research papers show up. Definitely people are posting it, but I think the professors, very well-known computer science professors, are actually on Twitter. They're very, very active, and they actually even have conversations with students. Why is this useful for you? Again, weak ties, right? These professors are weak ties for you, meaning having conversations with them. In the process, also learning through reading their papers, asking them questions. All of this is tying up with something else that I said before. I'm a social media guy. First slide I showed, right? All 4 platforms that I'm active. Therefore, I actually think that particularly Twitter. Actually, if you're interested, please go look at even a research on Twitter. How Twitter is playing a effective role on increasing the impact of your research also. There's actually research in the last 2-3 years where people have studied using blogs, using Twitter, effect of research also. Increasing of citations, increasing of visibility of your research. Okay, PhD students, some examples of PhD students who were actually active during their PhD life. Choices matter. This is Dumbledore's statement. Choices could be advisor, projects, problem statements. All of that are the choices that you make. Be careful with the choices that you make. So this part of the slide, so I only kept it as a buffer in case if any of you would need. But here is what I would suggest: scientific communication. Right? Here is a topic. This is a topic that you look up. You will get some of these ideas, which is regularly write blogs about your work. Be active or use Mendeley to manage your research portfolio, research papers that you read. Be active on ResearchGate. These are just prescriptive ones, not much to actually argue about it. GitHub, please write code, make things public, which is the next slide. Here is the one. Create public good. Create public good, which is that make your paper to anyway to become public. Paper, data set, code, systems that you build, make everything public. Again, there is research to show that if you do this, there's more visibility to your research, more visibility to your students, more visibility to the people who are working on it. So make all of them and just maintain a good website also. I think as PhD student, maintaining a good website is also necessary. Okay, let's do this. This is the part which is 11 more minutes. We can wrap up. So now that we have understood a little bit, that quick prescriptive part, don't worry, it was meant to give you only the terms. GitHub, make things public, write blogs, SlideShare, all of that. I will post my slides from this talk on SlideShare and actually do a post by end of today with the hashtag COTSCommat2021. Life after PhD. I think now let's take it. Okay, now I'm in the phase of, okay, I finished out, figure out what PhD is, I joined, I'm kind of finishing, what are the options? Options are pretty, sort of say limited in that sense, but in that limited space, I think there is lots of things to do. Freshly minted PhD, one option could be a postdoc, one option could be a startup probably moderate. Actually, this also is probably low, right? Directly becoming a PhD from, directly become a faculty from freshly minted PhD, because the demand is low, right? Directly getting into a PhD faculty. Postdoc, then you become a faculty. Probably this probability is pretty high. This probability is also high, right? This is also pretty high. So these are the options that one has after PhD. And I think people have gone from academia to industry, industry to academia, academia to a startup. All kinds of permutation combinations can happen. But I think just after PhD, the options are only some, which is postdoc, industry, industry research, right? Transitioning from industry to PhD, we talked about earlier also, which is without a PhD, if you're transitioning, what are the questions that you need to think about? Okay, so this is next 1 or 2 slides is more like promotion for ACM activities, which is PhD clinic. I already explained before what PhD clinic is. So if you're interested, feel free to go to this link, look at the options that are available. Feel free to actually connect. We recently finished 100 students interaction through PhD clinic platform. And last 3-4 months, we've been, I think these are the ones that I said before. Last 3 months, we've been organizing AMAs, Ask Me Anything, for different topics. And here are the topics, right? Only professors, only industry labs, PhD, to do PhD or not to do PhD. Those are all the questions that we ended up actually asking in these AMAs in the last 2-3 months, right? So that's good. There are some questions. That's all I had. So if you look at the reference here, this is the movie Bigger Last Scene. The movie ends there. And acknowledgements and lots of people who actually contributed in helping me put the slides together. Thanks to Mohit for the title, and definitely many others who have actually helped me. Some pointers for you in case if you're interested. There's a recent blog, actually. There's a blog that is floating around last 3-4 days. Last 3-4 days, where she has actually documented her PhD life in a blog. Very interesting sort of say dimensions to the experience that she has had. That's my last slide. That also has all my LinkedIn, Twitter, Insta. In the order, I think people probably will use it in this platform, but feel free to tag, feel free to connect, feel free to reach out if you need any more questions to be answered. But I'm happy to take the questions that is left here. Let's take one by one. Aman, I'm currently in my final year of my PhD in the area of graph mining. However, I want to do research in another area, such as ML after my PhD. How much is this feasible? Very much, Aman. There's no question. After your PhD, I don't know what you want to be, but if you're thinking about doing a postdoc, I think you should look for postdoc in ML areas. Faculty can offer you. But if you're looking at becoming a faculty, I think that's slightly different approach, which is that you become a faculty, then say that, look, with my understanding of graph mining, I want to move to machine learning and start working on the problems. So becoming a faculty is probably the easier path, but getting a faculty job is harder. Once you become a faculty, transitioning may be easier. But also remember, transitioning also has this expectation that you understand the literature. I think earlier there was a question about literature. Do I need to know all the literature in that area to actually work on that space? I think yes, right? Because to a large extent, your papers are going to be evaluated on what will already exist. The reviewers understand what already exists, and they're looking at your research to say that whether you're making that dent in this paper. For that, you need to know the literature. Unfortunately, if you know graph mining and you're submitting a machine learning paper, you need to figure out how to get your literature review done quickly. Aman, does that help? How much value does a PhD and does a PhD add over a master's for a career in industry research? So Sriram, I think I would highly recommend you to look at this YouTube video. It's all on ACM India's YouTube channel. For longer discussion, please look at it. But I think it's a choice. For example, look at him. He's Nitendra, who works at who's a vice president at MasterCard now. She's Nipur, who's actually a researcher at IBM. The conversation that we wanted to have was 2 people with PhD, 2 people without PhD, right? Nithendra has been in the industry for the last 20 years without a PhD, and you can do very well. So this is Shaurya. Shaurya is also the general chair of CORDS. He was also part of the AMA. Actually, Jayant is also part of the CORDS, I think. So Shaurya also came from industry to do a PhD. If you look at Shaurya's academic path, he was working in IBM, and then I think he decided to do a PhD, then went to IISc to get a PhD with Professor Narahari, and then he moved on. Now he's at Flipkart doing interesting things. Right? So it is, again, Sriram, it's a choice that you want to make. How fast will you grow in the ladder? How quickly will you reach there? Because every individual is unique. You can't really compare. You can't really say that, oh, Nitendra ne kar liya, so I can also do it. I think that's the wrong comparison. But it depends on what all you put in to get there. Sriram, I hope that helps. If not, please post another question. I can take that. How to choose between postdoc or industry after a PhD? How difficult is it to stick back to academia of a few years in industry? Swati, I think people have done this transition between academia to industry to academia, academia to industry. It's just that it gets a little harder when you think of, initially, I think it's harder, first couple of years, because I think if you spend, let's take 5 years in industry or 3 years in industry, you want to come back to academia, how is that 3 years experience going to be used is very much dependent on the institute that you're going to. It also depends on what experience you have, but it's highly also dependent on the institute that you go, how they actually use that industry experience, right? So I think you want to keep that in mind while making that choice. What is the impact of age to become a faculty after PhD? Nothing, Anshul. I think you can become a faculty after 40 also. I think if institutes are interested, if you have an interesting twist in your story of your profile, I think anybody would be interested in your profile. How to decide when to start a PhD? There will always seem an advantage in waiting a year and improving a profile. No, Harsh, I would go completely against that. So for you, Harsh, I will refer to this. Look for Ben. So I actually maintain a website for grad school. Just look for grad school admissions and my name and Ben Zhao. If there's a AMA I did with Ben where he argues against the point that you're saying, and I also agree that you should not wait. If you really want to do a PhD, just apply now and move on. I don't think so waiting for any time is going to help. And you don't need, I mean, what is a good profile? I don't understand what is improving a profile. I'm not convinced that you will have a perfect profile. Just think about perfect kursi, right? Perfect kursi kabhi nahi milne wala. So advisors also probably are not, I think as an advisor, I don't look for the perfect kursi. You know? I'm looking for 3-4 students of one which will do well, and the rest probably will do a decent job and get a PhD. Right? In a recent grad, I am a recent graduate with a bachelor's degree. What is the value that a research-based master's would add for a PhD versus pursuing a direct PhD apart from the credits? Okay, so you want to do Prahlad, I think the big advantage that you will have, which I think in my case it happened without the master's also, and I think it's the case with Shaurya and people like that. So going to an industry, I think if it is possible for you to spend a couple of years before doing a PhD, either undergrad work and then a PhD, or an undergrad master's and a work and a PhD, allows you to understand what you want from PhD better. With a master's, it's not about credits. Prahlad, sorry if I were just focused on credits. I think master's also allows you to pick a domain that is more closer to you. Undergrad doesn't. I think earlier one student also said, right, can I dent in undergrad? I think it's possible, but it's actually rare that an undergrad student will know where to go with just finishing after the undergrad. Master's allows you to do that dip a little bit with the 16 or with the 32 credits of thesis. All that, if you do, you either want to do it or you don't want to do it. I've had master students who say that they did an area A and then decided that they will not do this area A for the PhD and try something else. Prahlad, I hope that helps. Is it always necessary to have a tier 1 papers for postdoc, or what should be your suggestion to get a postdoc for? Amit, I think this is very, very subjective to people who are offering the postdoc, right, Amit? I think if you're looking for a postdoc at CMU, probably the expectations are very different from any other institute that you're applying for, right? So it also depends on where you're applying for. So I don't think so there's a blanket answer for saying, oh, if I have a tier 1. So for example, IIIT Delhi student who has worked with me in the past had a tier 1, multiple tier 1s papers when he finished PhD, and he thought that people will put, as Swati said earlier, have a red carpet for him to get a job. He did not get a job. Multiple tier 1 papers, having difficulty in getting a job in India. A IIIT Delhi PhD student, whereas while at the same time, there's somebody who did not have that prolific research, so to say, publications, ended up getting the probably very cool job after PhD. So I think it also depends on the skills. I think tier 1 paper, it gives you a metric for the people sitting on the other side to say that, okay, he's gone through this rigorous approach. He's convinced the, so to say, technical domain that his work is worthwhile, blah, blah, blah. All that is done. But I think cracking an interview and getting a postdoc, cracking an interview and getting a sort of a job is very, very different. Okay, Amit, hope that helps. Okay, super. So Amit, Kaushik seems to be good. So yeah, if you're okay with, yeah. So I'll put my coordinates again. Please +1 if things were okay until now. You got away. So yeah, +1 if you got away something that was useful. Okay, good. Hopefully it was useful a little bit for all of you. And thanks, Squads and Command, Professor Kamal, for the opportunity. And thanks to many of them for helping me put together this talk, which is a different style of a talk. But hopefully it helped you get some points out of it. And now, if the admin is okay, can you let people switch on their camera? Yes, Professor Kamal, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, PK. It's a very agile talk. People have got a lot of points out of it, and I firmly believe that you should have it in your heart to do it. You took examples from movies. You should have a romantic relationship with your PhD. In some sense. And very apt points. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. 1.5 hours that I have had listening to you. Thank you very much. A big hand for you.